Hi, Brenton here from Effortless Swimming. In today's video, we're looking at Olympic champion Florian Wellbrock, and we're going to have a look at his technique. He posted this video to Instagram recently, which is @FlowSwim, and this is him swimming in the flume. Now, there are some subtle changes that happen when people go into the flume because the water's being pushed towards them, as opposed to the water being mostly stationary. But overall, the stroke is pretty similar. I'll talk about some of those changes, but the stroke is fairly similar. Now, in this video, you might pick up a couple of things that you perhaps didn't know, perhaps a couple of things that you might find are helpful for your own stroke. The thing with this though is he's got a very traditional sort of freestyle stroke that you'd think of as like a perfect sort of distance freestyle stroke. The athletes that I work with, primarily triathletes, primarily adults and open water swimmers, some people, this sort of style is great for them, but a lot of the times they don't have the same sort of arm span, height, ankle flexibility, shoulder mobility, all this sorts of stuff. So you don't necessarily need to swim this way, but there are certainly some things that you could probably take away from this video that Florian does extremely well. So let's take a look at them. Now, side on, the first thing we often look at here is body position. And you can see he sits horizontally in the water, creating very little extra drag. So that's really the first thing that we want to try and get in place, is that horizontal body position. And when we go through the 8-week faster freestyle course, one of the first things we work on is that balance, which is getting horizontal with the head, the hips and the heels up near the surface. There are 3 touch points that we're aiming to get near the surface, because any extra drag that's created from dropped legs takes a lot of effort to overcome it. So that's the first thing that we typically will look at, is your body position. Now, if you have a look at his head position, which is a contributor to what happens through the rest of the body, he looks slightly forwards there. The range that we teach is 0 to about 45 degrees in front, because there's a range of where you should be looking. And you can see he's looking slightly forwards, which tends to suit open water swimmers really well, and most swimmers really well. And the thing I like here too is you'll see this great posture. His head is a continuation of his spine. So he's got this, it's not completely straight, but it's just this very slight curve. So really nice with his posture. And the way that we would explain that is you want to be tall and proud, almost like you're lengthening through your spine and through your neck there. So that's really nice. And then as he turns his head to breathe, you'll see he gets quite a low breath. He's getting what we'd call split vision breathing, where that bottom goggle stays partly in the water and he's looking straight to the side. Now, I don't mind if people look a little bit further, just as long as you're looking to the side and not up to the sky and not behind you or in front of you. So looking to the side's the key thing there. The other part of that is his timing. He times his breath perfectly with his stroke. And this is really quite a common one that will throw the alignment out or throw people's strokes out, is if they're breathing at the wrong time. So the right timing here, and the way I would explain this, is you want to pull yourself into the breath. So as you'll notice here that as he goes through this part here, he starts to turn his head once his arm gets to about his shoulder. So his head starts to turn now as his hand is about to pass underneath his shoulder, and then he turns his head along with that arm pulling through. So by the time his hand finishes out the back, the mouth is out of the water, he can get that breath fairly quickly, and then he can turn the head back just as that hand is coming back in there. So that's the timing of the breath. So you want to pull yourself into the breath, as you can see there. So that's the timing of it. Now, the other thing you'll notice, he does a good job of this, is he only turns his head to the side. He doesn't lift up and then do this big turn. Now, you'll see that there. It's almost like he's got this skewer through his head, and his head's on that skewer, and the only way he's allowed to turn it is he will turn the skewer and the head will go with it, as you can see here. So very nice with keeping the alignment and the balance. Now, not to say you can't look forwards a little bit when you go to turn, because you will see that a little bit with swimmers like Katie Ledecky. There's a bit of a look forwards and then a turn, where she's got that more sort of galloping freestyle. But primarily, we don't want to be lifting the head up too much as we go to turn, which is a fairly common thing that I'll see. And sometimes it's almost like just a natural thing that becomes a part of the stroke when people swim open water a lot, is even when they're not sighting, they'll lift their head up too much and then turn to breathe. So we want to try and keep the head mostly on that skewer that we looked at. Now, if we have a look at the kick here, you'll notice that he's using a 6-beat kick there. So it's 3 kicks to each arm stroke. So if we slow this down, he's got this on the right side, he's got 1, 2, 3. And then on the other arm, he's got 1, 2, 3. So that's what we call a 6-beat kick. Now, the thing with the 6-beat kick is you can have a 6-beat kick and still do it really comfortably. So the main thing with your kick is that we don't want to be kicking too hard for any sort of longer events, because it's the kick that's going to tire you out the fastest. And I had a swimmer send through their video the other day, and struggling to make more than about 25 meters without getting really tired. And we had a look at the kick, and it's like, it's hard work. If I was kicking that hard, I'd be tired in 25 meters as well. So we just want to keep the kick as comfortable as we can. One of the main things here with the kick is keep the toes as well pointed as you can. So toes pointing behind you there, rather than pointing to the bottom of the pool. So toes pointed behind you, heels breaking the surface, and keep the kick in a space that's about roughly that big. I think of that as like a bucket out behind you. You want to kick in the bucket. And another way you can think of your kick as well is you want to be a ballerina in a bucket. So if you look at his toes here, or his feet, you'll notice that they're pointed most of the time behind him. Now, I know a lot of adults that have very sort of stiff ankles there. Point them as best you can to the point where you're not cramping. But if you picture yourself as like a ballerina where like they're on their tippy toes, their knees will bend a bit, but not too much. If you think of that ballerina in a bucket, that's going to give you a very efficient and effective kick. Now, the other important thing here is the timing of the kick. There's two ways you can think of this. You can think of it as you want to go through your catch at the same time the leg is kicking down on that side. So his left arm catch goes with his left foot kick. So you can see it there, left arm catch, left foot kick. Or the other way you could think of it, and it's basically the same thing, is you want your left foot to kick down when your right hand enters. So it's kind of the opposite sides, but it's the same thing there. So his left foot kicks down as his right hand enters there, but it's the same thing. So if you feel like perhaps my timing is out, like I don't feel very well coordinated, what you could try there is you could try to time the kick in either of those two ways. It's basically the same, and just time it on one side to begin with. It's hard to think of timing your left and your right, every single stroke. There's a lot going on there. But just think about one side. Maybe it's just your left side and you're trying to coordinate the catch and kick together, or you're thinking of it as hand entry and opposite side kick down. So just go for one side to begin with. And what you'll find is that when you do time things well, things are coordinated really well there. Whereas if it's out of sync, then obviously it's not going to be that well connected. The way I sort of see it here is it's like when you kick down there, all right, so you're kicking down here, have a look at what happens to his hip. So once he finishes that kick down, it's like his hip sort of like stabilized there. It's provided him with this sort of almost like an anchor there, where when he gets to the power phase, which is through here, he's then got the hip sort of stabilized, like he's got something to pull against or press against, and then he can press all the way back through there. So that's why I sort of see that timing happening at that point in the stroke there. Now, the next thing we'll have a look at here is the entry. Now, what you might notice here, if you've watched our videos for a while, one of the things I sort of talk about, and I'll try and get people to do, is get down to this position, that position there, fairly quickly. So once the hand enters, which for most people it should be entering fingertips first, which you'll see, and the elbow up there. Once you've done that, you want to reach out and get down to this position here fairly quickly, which is fingers below wrist, wrist below elbow, and the fingertips are about underarm depth there. That's what I'd consider the start of the catch there. And you want to get down there fairly quickly. But what you might notice here is that on the strokes where he breathes, so say this one here, you'll notice that his hand stays up quite high for a little while there. Then he eventually gets down to that position. Now, the thing with that position is it's not as efficient, it's not as streamlined as he would be if he was here. But what I think is happening here, and I don't know if this happens as much when he's not in the flume, but certainly in the flume, and this is what I've experienced for the couple of times I've swum in it, is when you're going to get your breath, you need a little bit more lift while you're getting your breath there. And so with the hand up that little bit higher through that part of the stroke, that oncoming water sort of pushes against it, provides you with that little bit more lift to be able to get the breath comfortably. So I think that's probably what's happening there, is that the hand sort of stays a bit higher than what it might traditionally do, or what it might normally do, compared to when he's in the pool. That's my guess. But the main thing here, and this is what I would take away from it, is you'll notice though, even though he comes up there and he's quite high, closer to the surface than what we'd normally sort of aim for, is he's still got the right position there. He's still got the wrist slightly popped up, so his hand and forearm is together. It's one paddle, and he's not dropping the wrist like that. Because if you drop the wrist, as in like, I guess you break at the wrist there, you lose all sense of feel and hold of the water. And that's what we sometimes see. People will enter, they'll reach forwards and they'll come up there and they've dropped their wrist, and then you lose any sense of hold. So yes, while he's still coming up a bit higher than what I'd normally sort of be trying to get people to do, he doesn't drop the wrist. That's the key thing. So keep the wrist slightly what we call elevated, or just, in that position there. And that keeps that whole paddle, your big paddle of your hand and forearm together, working as one. Now, as he goes through the catch, like he's got an amazing catch, and probably more than what we would try and get most of the swimmers that I work with to do, because you don't need to go for almost like a 90-degree catch here to be a good swimmer. It might not be that comfortable for a lot of people. We only go for anywhere in that high elbow range. So as he starts the catch, which is here, which is that fingers below wrist, wrist below elbow position, the upper arm stays in a similar position for a little while his hand and forearm moves downwards, where he then gets this terrific high elbow catch, which is, if we draw a line from his shoulder to his fingertips, that elbow is above it. And the reason we want to get there is then the forearm and hand is angled in a really good way to press back, and it's that big paddle that then continues to face back all the way through. It's basically essentially vertical all the way through here, and it just provides him with a lot more surface area to press back with as he's going through that part of the stroke. So he does a really nice job of it. What you'll notice here too, and this makes a big difference if you're not doing it, is the catch phase, which is that's the catch. If you ever hear a coach talking about it, that's the setup phase. That's not the part where you rip hard at the water. That is the part where you're really just sort of setting yourself up to then be able to apply a bit more pressure, a bit more power, because the real power phase, it's primarily through here, because this is where you're strongest, and that is where you're then angled in a better way to be pressing backwards, which is going to move you forwards. Whereas if you're just out the front, you're like, I've got to go faster, so I'm going to rip hard straight away. It's not very beneficial, because you're just going to be pressing down initially, and you're quite weak in those overhead movements too. It's just a weak position for the arm to be in. So that's his catch, as you can see there. Now under the body, you'll see that this part here, we can't see the front view, but one of the other positions, aside from a good catch there, that we want to get is the power diamond. Now what the power diamond is from the side, it's shoulder, elbow, hand, completely aligned there. Because you've got all this surface area then pressing back. Now what the power diamond looks like from the front is, it's like a half diamond, it's like a triangle. So here you'll see his elbow pointed out to the side, his fingertips are pointing down. Terrific power diamond if we were looking front on. And then he just maintains that all the way through, and he presses back past the hip. So the hip's about there, he presses back just past the hip. So it's just a really nice thing to watch here with Florian. And I mean, if you look at his stroke compared to some of the other swimmers, he's probably got the most sort of classic traditional freestyle technique that you'd see in distance swimmers here. But there are a lot of different ways to swim fast freestyle. If you look at someone like Katie Ledecky, she's got more of that galloping sort of style. You look at Peltrinieri, very different style. He's sort of got a galloping one as well. So it's all about finding what works best for you, because I would normally try and get someone to work towards that style that they would naturally gravitate to anyway. So you don't necessarily have to completely radically change the way that you swim. Sometimes we just want to make sure that we get some of these key parts of the stroke into your stroke, no matter what sort of style you're swimming with. And that's what we cover in the 8-week Faster Freestyle course, which I'll put a link to below. So thanks very much for watching this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts below. Was there anything that I missed? Anything that you didn't know before watching this video? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.